All right, thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Marcy Rainbolt. I'm one of the Government Affairs Associates with the Wisconsin Counties Association. And today we have with us Meagan Wolfe. She is the administrator with the Wisconsin Elections Commission. And today, unfortunately, we are meeting online as part of our cybersecurity educational seminar. We had hoped to meet in person. Unfortunately, with the pandemic ongoing, we felt it was just in everybody's safety to move to an online format. So we are recording this and we'll be sending it out to everybody. You'll be receiving this. As always, the Wisconsin Counties Association staff is always available to answer any questions. Meagan will be providing her contact information at the end of this recording. So if you have specific questions for her, you will be able to contact her. And as always, again, contact us at the association. And again, thank you all for your patience as we work through this pandemic and moving to this online format for this educational seminar. So with that, I'll turn it over to Meagan. And thank you, Meagan, so much for taking the time today to record with us.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to all the county officials that help to support elections. So as Marcy mentioned, I'm Meagan Wolfe. I'm the administrator of the State of Wisconsin Elections Commission and also the chief election official for the state of Wisconsin. Today, what I was going to go over is first, who secures elections in Wisconsin? So who kind of plays what role in that security effort? How are elections secured in the state of Wisconsin? And then what's next? Security is rapidly evolving, right? Every single day there's different threats or different things that require all of our attention to secure elections. And so the what's next is always really important and something that changes on a pretty regular basis. So starting off with who secures elections in the state of Wisconsin, and you'll see it's a really holistic approach in terms of how we all have a role. First, if we start at the federal level, we have a lot of really excellent federal partners that help with securing elections here in the state of Wisconsin. So the Department of Homeland Security, they have a division called CISA, the CenterNet for Internet Security. Oh boy, now I forgot what the A stands for, but it's a new subdivision of Homeland Security that works a lot on security infrastructure for elections and making sure that we all have best practices and access to resources. We also work really closely with the FBI. So some of these organizations are involved in helping us monitor election threats, helping making sure that we know any sort of information that trends, different things that they're seeing in the intelligence community to help us, as well as the law enforcement piece. If somebody does try to tamper with cybersecurity in elections, that is taken very seriously. Investigations happen, the FBI gets involved, and even something that might seem like, well, they didn't make a successful attempt into our systems, they're still on it. They're still going to make sure that we find those people and that we make sure we send a message that you do not tamper with election cybersecurity infrastructure in the state of Wisconsin. There are also some federal organizations that we're pretty heavily involved with. One is the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. You'll hear a little bit more about them when we start talking about funding and grant opportunities that come down from the federal level. I'm a member of the National Association of State Election Directors and the National Association of Secretary of States. NASED, they're the one that it's all my counterparts around the country that serve as election directors for the state. And so we're able to come together and make recommendations to Congress and to other federal decision makers about what election administrators need. And I see it as my role to make sure that we're advocating for our unique structure here in the state of Wisconsin whenever Congress or other federal organizations consider how they're going to fund or support elections. I want to make sure that Wisconsin's voice is heard. And because I am the chief election official, which is usually a role reserved for the Secretary of State in most other states, I also meet regularly with the National Association of Secretary of States, because again, they play that role too, to make sure that we're all advocating for the needs of elections in our various states. So at the state level, we're incredibly fortunate to have a large number of state partners as well that help us secure elections here in our great state. So the State of Wisconsin Elections Commission, a little bit about us. So we build and maintain all of the election technology and systems that run elections. This is a little unique to the rest of the country. Around the country, you're going to see counties, interestingly enough, that have to build their own election systems. So if you're familiar with the WISVote system, the system that all the clerks use to enter voter registrations, issue absentee ballots, record participation, to produce poll books for municipalities, all of that happens in a statewide system here in Wisconsin. In a lot of other states, that would happen at the county level, and the county would be responsible for developing and maintaining those systems, in addition to things like the My Vote Wisconsin website. So the My Vote Wisconsin website is where voters go to connect with their voter data. So they can go register to vote, check their registration, request an absentee ballot, find their polling place, see what's on their ballot. It's the voter's window into the statewide voter registration database. And so those are huge systems where we have a lot of responsibility to make sure that we're securing all of the data for Wisconsin voters in that statewide system. It's not something that's housed at the county level in our state because we're more municipal based. And so we do that at the state level. We also built that system ourselves, which is also very unique. A lot of other states will contract with a vendor to build a system like that, but we want to have control over the system. We want to know exactly who's making what changes, and we want to make sure that we can adapt our system if changes arise. And that happens a lot here, where there's court decisions or legislative activity that trigger changes in the statewide system. And so this allows us to be able to make sure that the system always works for our structure and for whatever our laws are at a given time. Another way that we're different is our state elections commission is overseen by a 6-member bipartisan commission. So again, in most other states, 44 other states, it's going to be the Secretary of State, who's a partisan elected official that oversees elections for that state. Here in the state of Wisconsin, I'm the administrator. I'm appointed by that bipartisan commission, and I'm required by state law to be nonpartisan. And so my appointment is also subject to Senate confirmation, a process which I went through in 2019. And so it's very different than how other states are organized in terms of running elections. And that 6-member partisan panel is appointed by legislative majority and minority leadership. And it also includes 2 former municipal and or county clerks. And right now we have 2 former county clerks that we're very honored to have serve as part of our commission as well. We also provide training to counties and municipalities. So training is one of our main things that we do, making sure that everybody's on the same page about how to secure elections, how to administer elections. Consistency is probably one of our greatest security efforts, really, when you think about it, is making sure that we're all paying attention to the right things and doing things in a consistent and a secure way. We have about 3,000 users of our statewide voter registration database. Again, in most other states, they run at the municipal level. So that means that they might have, 50 to 100 counties that are accessing a system if they have a statewide one, or if it's county-based, they just have their county users accessing it. We have 3,000 county and municipal users. So that's a very different type of system that you're going to see in other places. But it also means that because of its importance, we have some incredible cybersecurity measures in place. At the state level, we also have some other partners. We have the Division of Enterprise Technology. So they're a department of the Department of Administration. They oversee the state IT infrastructure. So they house the servers. They make sure that we have all the firewalls and sort of that protection around the state infrastructure. We then, as the agency, build the actual technical applications, but they really help to protect that overall state infrastructure. And it's really impressive, some of the advanced tools that they have in place to do that. We also work really closely with Wisconsin Emergency Management. with the National Guard, with our State Fusion Center, the State Emergency Operations Center. We've been working really closely with them and have a seat there during the COVID epidemic. And other agencies like DMV, DOC, DOJ, we work with them too because we're always getting data from our partner agencies to make sure that clerks have the information they need to keep the voter lists current and up to date. So the county clerk level, so this is one that you're all probably very familiar with. And in most other states, this is where election security and election administration would happen. But in our state, the county clerks play much more limited roles in elections and election security, but still incredibly important roles in our state elections as well. So each county clerk serves as the chief election official of their county. Most of them are going to be elected partisan officials in those counties. And some of them, a really important role that some of them play is they contract with their municipalities to provide services in the state's WISC system. So some of them have contracts in place to help enter in voter registration applications, issue absentee ballots, utilize the IT systems, because especially some of our smaller townships and things, they may not have the technical expertise or the time. A lot of them are part-time to be able to do those things. And so some counties take those roles on the behalf of their municipalities through a contract. Many of our county clerks also serve as trainers. So because we have so many municipalities, the counties really are a conduit in a lot of ways to getting information to the municipalities. And some of them play a very active role in training municipal clerks in all things elections and in election security. They also design and distribute ballots, and some procure and program their voting equipment as well. And so these are, of course, some really, really important things when it comes to security and integrity of our elections. The statute also requires that the county clerk post the unofficial results of the elections on their website on election night. And so the municipalities send the results to the county. The county then has to post those results on their website. And so, of course, this is a process where that transaction has to happen securely. They have to make sure that nothing changed. And then they have to protect their IT infrastructure at the county level to make sure that somebody can't come in and tamper with those unofficial results. So even though they're unofficial, and even if somebody did tamper with them, it's not going to change the outcome of the election. But what it would do is severely undermine people's confidence in the election process. And so, you know, a lot of these things, the perception is just as important as the actual cybersecurity of it. And then also in the counties, you know, we work a lot with the county departments. You wouldn't think about how sometimes, you know, we have a really close relationship with the county IT departments. We've been lucky enough to loop in on some of their organizations to make sure that the IT professionals at the county and municipal level are part of the conversations about election security. We work with law enforcement, emergency management. A new one that has emerged this year has been the county health departments. All those county departments that we have to make sure are aware of elections and could play a really important role if something came up. If all of a sudden there's a snowstorm on election day, the highway department becomes pretty incredibly important to the success of that election. And so we try to make sure that we're looping in with all these various county entities as well. The municipal level. So again, in most other states, this is not where election administration happens. In the state of Wisconsin, this is where the majority of the statutory election responsibilities fall, is at the municipal level. And we have 1,850 municipal clerks. Each city, town, and village by law is required to have their own local election official to administer elections to their jurisdiction. And so each of these clerks, no matter how small the township, is required to know the election process and to run elections, to train poll workers, to register voters, to issue absentee ballots. All those things happen at the municipal level. And they also have to use the WISC vote system. Most of them use it directly to enter in their absentees, to enter in their registrations. And so cybersecurity, really important to make sure that they have secure technology to be able to do that. And some of them that just don't have the time or the access, they rely on their county to help them with some of those efforts. But they also train poll workers, and many of them have very, very little IT support. So most of our counties, they're gonna have at least some IT professionals employed by that county. Our municipalities, some of our clerks are the sole employee of their township, And we find that 2/3 of them are part-time. So 2/3 of that 1,850, they might work 5 hours a week for that township. And so, it's a very different sort of setup than you'd see in other states, where they're going to have a county elections department where people are running all of these things. Those are happening in each of our small towns. And then, of course, just the disparate size in terms of our municipalities. We have some really small townships, less than 50 people or less than 50 registered voters. And then you've got the city of Milwaukee. And so how do you scale cybersecurity needs and efforts for all those different types of jurisdictions? And then we also try to keep in touch with these other municipal entities too. Municipal school districts, they have elections too. There's, school district elections. And so we have to be involved with all those school districts as well. The utilities, the street departments, law enforcement, IT professionals, all those people at the local level also play an important role in securing elections. Voters and the public, I always try to reinforce that I think everybody plays a role in securing elections. If people have questions about how elections are secured, they need to make sure that they're finding out the facts. And we need to make sure that we're getting the facts out there so that people know how to interact with the process. Because the worst thing that can happen is people have misunderstandings and they perpetuate misinformation. And rumors are prevalent in elections. And so everybody has, I think, a really critical responsibility to make sure that they are spreading facts and not rumors when it comes to elections. And if somebody has questions about the process, finding those facts, contacting your local election official to make sure that you're helping people understand the process rather than further muddying sort of the waters about it. So again, we're all responsible, and I really do believe that we're all responsible. And if people have questions, or if they have seen something that makes them question the elections process, bring that to your local election official's attention, bring it to your county's attention, bring it to the state's attention, so that we can help explain it or help to investigate what's going on. So what do we do specifically in the state of Wisconsin to secure our elections? And there are a lot of things, but I do think that we have sort of a three-prong approach to how we secure elections here in the state of Wisconsin. So there's three really big initiatives. One is the statewide voter registration database, that WisVote system, which we already talked about. The next is voting equipment. So the actual tabulators at the polling place on election day that help to tabulate those unofficial results. And then training. So I see these as sort of the three main pieces of securing elections here in our state. So let's start with WisVote and how that statewide system works. So the WisVote system is really an end-to-end election administration system. It starts with the candidate filing process. So when candidates come in, file their nomination papers, ballot access all happens in the statewide system. Then we have to create ballot styles. So we have to figure out what candidates belong in what districts, and then make sure only the right voters get the right ballot. And it's a really complicated process that, again, requires a lot of security and integrity with the data that we're working with. Addressing, also a really complicated piece too. Every single voter has to be very specifically geolocated in our system to, again, make sure we know exactly where does that pin of their house land, so that we know what districts, wards, sanitary districts, school districts, where do they land in that grid, so we can get them the right ballot, so they're actually represented by the right people and they're able to vote in the right contests. Is tricky and very important business. Voter registration happens in there. So all the voter registration records, whether they're active, so people that are eligible right now to get a ballot, or if it's somebody that was at some time registered in Wisconsin is no longer eligible, those inactive records are still in the system too, as more or less an archive. So they wouldn't be able to get a ballot, but we have to maintain all those records throughout time to have that voter's history. Poll books and poll lists, that's where we print those. So when you go to your polling place, you state your name and address, show your photo ID, and you're going to sign that poll book. Again, the right poll book has to go to the right polling place so that we know that you voted on election day, and so that you receive your ballot. And so all those poll lists are generated out of the statewide system. And then eventually voter participation. So after each election, voter participation is recorded in the system, and we're able to eventually declare the winners and the losers of the contest. And so that all happens in the statewide system as well. And then the WisVote system is what populates the myvote.wi.gov website. So everything a voter interacts with there is the result of data that's being input by those 1,850 municipal clerks or 72 county clerks into the statewide system. So when they set up polling places, my vote's going to show their polling place. When they set up the ballot styles to show you who's going to be on your ballot, then that's going to show on my vote. So my vote is only as good as the data that's being put into it at the municipal and the county level. And then we have a bunch of protections for that statewide system. I mean, those are really important things and functions of our society, personally identifiable information that's in our system. And so those are things we have to protect. Only the right people can have access to that information, and we have to make sure that we know what's going on there. So we have secured and segregated access to the system. So if you're in a small township, you're only going to be able to change things relevant to your township. You're not going to be able to go into a larger jurisdiction or statewide to change things. Everything is very well segregated in that system so that people cannot move laterally throughout the system if they were to gain access. We also have multi-factor authentication. Surprisingly enough, being that we have the most users of our statewide system and the most decentralized system, you wouldn't think that we would be cutting edge in a lot of these things, but we are. We were the first state to implement multi-factor authentication in our statewide voter registration system for over 3,000 users. And so we've been using that for a number of years now with our clerks using a state-of-the-art multi-factor system. We also have endpoint detection installed on all devices of the users that access the statewide system. So if a municipal clerk wants to access WisVote to enter registrations, to enter absentee requests, they're going to have endpoint detection installed in their systems. And for some of you that might work in county IT, you've probably had to help your clerk with this, get that endpoint testing installed, because we have to make sure that every device that touches our system, that it is kept patched, it is kept up to date, it does not have a virus on it. And so we're able to use that endpoint detection as a gatekeeper for our system, because first of all, we can't have somebody with an infected device potentially infecting the whole statewide system. And secondly, it allows us to provide a service to many of these small local election officials. So in a township where they may not have any IT support, if a clerk enters WisVote and we see that they have a virus on their computer, first of all, they're not going to be able to get into the statewide system to perpetuate that. And secondly, we can contact them, we can help them, we can see what's going on with their device, and we can offer them services and connect them with resources. And so a lot of those places may not know that they're even experiencing a problem until we're able to tell them through that endpoint detection. We also do a lot of monitoring with Albert sensors, which is a federal program that helps us share threat information and also monitor and detect any threats coming towards the state network. So there's a tremendous amount of monitoring and detection that's going on every day. It's said that there's something like 90% of the emails that are sent to state users are blocked every single day because they're deemed erroneous or malicious. And so the same type of thing is happening with the state network, where they're monitoring every bit of traffic that comes to the state enterprise, and only legitimate business with the state of Wisconsin is allowed access into our enterprise and ultimately access into the state of Wisconsin election system as well. The server structure, again, is housed at DET. They help us with all of that sort of big picture infrastructure, protections, firewalls, all of that happens on the server side at the DET level. And then we do a lot of assessments and monitoring. So we're always bringing Homeland Security and others in to take a look at our systems. to make sure that we don't have any vulnerabilities. And if we do, we want to address those right away to make sure that someone's not able to access our system. We even do retroactive assessments on our system as well, to make sure that somebody didn't previously gain access that we're not aware of, so that we can take a look at our system's present state, future state, and also past state to make sure that there weren't any compromises previously. So those are things that are happening on a continual, ongoing, sometimes weekly basis to assess all of our technology. And so we also have some other programs that we work with our local election officials on. One is a hardware loaner program. So let's say that you are a municipality and your computer has been infected. That's the sole device of your municipality. What would you do to keep running your election? We actually have a loaner hardware program where we can send out a compliant, secure device to a jurisdiction to help them be able to continue to securely run elections while their device is being fixed. And so, this I think helps us to be able to make sure we're finding those infected devices because we have something to offer them when their device is being remediated. We also have a help desk where clerks can call us and let us know if they have some kind of incident, and we will connect them with the resources they need. So be it the state cyber response team, be it some of our federal resources, we will make sure that they get help if they have some type of a virus or something on their computer or an infected network. We can help connect them with the right resources. We even have a 24-hour hotline with emergency management. If a clerk finds themselves in a situation in the middle of the night where they have an infected device that they're afraid might impact elections, we can get them assistance right away. So we want to make sure that clerks don't hold that information, that they let us know, and we truly are there to help them out with that information as well. So voting equipment, this is one that, is interesting. And I think especially from a county perspective, they play a really important role in this process. And so again, voting equipment is completely separate from that WisVote system that we just talked about. So WisVote is the database that runs election administration. The voting equipment is what is actually tabulating the ballots at the polls on election day. Those systems do not talk to one another, and they're not integrated in any way. And voting equipment is run by a vendor. So voting equipment is something that a county or a municipality goes through a company to be able to purchase. Now, before any jurisdiction can buy voting equipment, it has to go through certification at both the federal and the state level. So the US EAC certifies and sends out voting equipment to an independent testing lab to be tested before it can be offered for certification or sale at the state level. Then once that happens, if there's an application with us, we also go out and do a campaign to certify that voting equipment to make sure that it operates the way that the statutes require and to make sure that we feel like it's secure. Once we do that test, it goes in front of our commission, who takes a look at our findings and decides whether or not it meets the letter of the law and can be offered for sale here in the state of Wisconsin. So that happens in every piece of voting equipment that clerks are able to buy here in the state. Each piece of voting equipment has to go through a pre-election logic and accuracy test. So every single piece of voting equipment before election day has to be tested to make sure that it's functioning properly, make sure that it's tabulating test ballots appropriately, and that result set has integrity. And so that happens in every single community. So all 1,850 jurisdictions before each election are doing this testing, and it's publicly noticed. So anybody can come watch it, be a part of it, ask questions. There's usually not a lot of participation, but we always encourage people to find these opportunities, because truly in all 1,850 places, this happens before every election. So if people have questions about how that equipment functions, they can go watch it actually be tested and be part of the process. After elections then, voting equipment is randomly selected for a post-election audit to again make sure that the unofficial result set matches a retabulation and then a hand count of a reporting unit of ballots. So of course, we don't announce who's going to be randomly selected until after the election. And then about 5% of the voting equipment is randomly selected after the election, again, to do that hand count to make sure that the voting equipment did tabulate correctly, that there weren't any errors in it. And so those results are all publicly available after each election for people to watch, and they're public meetings as well. So if somebody wants to go watch these audits being conducted, they're certainly welcome to attend those in their community. And then another piece of the process is that the results on election night, those are unofficial. So those results that you see on the ticker on the news on election night, those are completely unofficial, and they still have to go through 3 levels of certification before they're actually verified and certified as the official results of the election. And so each municipality after the election has to go through and reconcile all of their voting materials, make sure that the right number of ballots were issued, that the right number of people signed the poll book, all of those things. And if there is a problem with the tally or with how the election was conducted, they have to figure that out and reconcile it before they can certify the results at the local level. Then it goes to the county. Some of you might be familiar with this, where they have to do the same thing, the county board of canvass, to make sure that there aren't any issues, that everything reconciles, and then they certify at the county level. Then it comes to us at the state, and we do the same thing. We go through and make sure everything makes sense. Does it make sense that this jurisdiction that only has 50 voters, that there were 60 ballots cast? That wouldn't make sense. And so we would send that back to the local level, and they'd have to explain what happened. Was it somebody entered the data incorrectly, or was there something else that they need to take a look at before we can certify? And so certification of an election doesn't happen for almost a month after an election, because so much care is given to go through and double check that the ballots were cast correctly. And then of course, every single ballot in the state of Wisconsin has a paper auditable trail. Every single one. So about 80% of ballots are cast on a ballot where the voter is going to mark it and then put it through an optical scan machine. The rest might have either paper ballots where they're just filling out with a paper and pen. They don't actually have a tabulator. And then there's some that have what's called a DRE, and that's where you make your selection on the screen. It then shows you sort of a receipt of how the machine counted your vote. And if there is a mistake, if something went wrong, you're able to cancel that out and do it again. But every single ballot cast here has a paper auditable trail. That's the official record of the election. So if there were a question about the voting equipment or the results, we would always go back to that paper trail as the official record of the election. So training is the next piece, and this is one where our local election officials have just been incredible in being very receptive to cybersecurity training and making sure that this has been front and center. So the county clerks have also just been incredible in playing a really important role in helping connect the local election officials with this training as well. So one of our biggest initiatives when it comes to cybersecurity training is that any of our clerks that want access to the statewide voter registration database, before they get a username, before they get a password, before they get their second factor to be able to enter the system, they have to go through 6 cybersecurity training modules. They're specific to elections and also very general. They talk about things like how to create a secure password, how to browse safely, how to avoid phishing emails, in addition to how to use the statewide system securely. And so we won't even issue a username and a password until the applicant has actually gone through this training, because we want to make sure that everybody has a base level understanding of cybersecurity best practices as well. We also have, again, a really cutting edge program for what we call tabletop exercise training programs. And prior to COVID, this was something that was happening every week around Wisconsin, where clerks would go and do a scenario-based in-person training where we would run through cybersecurity scenarios, and they would work together to figure out how we would address them. How would we go about remediating this or communicating this on election day if there were some kind of cyber threat. And so we had done thousands of these types of events in the months and years leading up to COVID. And so now we're taking a fresh look at that training and figuring out how to offer that remotely, how to continue to engage our local election officials in these thinking exercises, these scenario-based exercises, so that we know how we would respond in the event of a cyber emergency. And we do this on a regular basis at the state and the federal level too. So we're always talking with our partners about sort of what does doomsday look like and how would we respond? How would we communicate? How would we make sure that we're addressing the situation? It's been a really, really useful exercise. And I actually think in a lot of ways, the skills we've all learned in those TTX trainings, they were so transferable when COVID happened, when, as it's happening, that we're able to figure out how we communicate with our partners, how we take a problem and we address it. And so it's been a really excellent, I think, exercise for us to go through. We also have a lot of communications training because we find when it comes to cybersecurity, again, the threats that come from misinformation or people not being able to communicate what's happening correctly can sometimes even outweigh the actual cyber risks. So, a lot of our small jurisdictions, they maybe only have 5 hours a week where they're the clerk. So they don't necessarily have an expertise in cybersecurity or discussing some of these things we do to secure elections. And so we make sure to give them tools and training about how to communicate the great things that they're doing to secure elections, whether that's making sure that they're keeping their voted absentee ballots in a bin with a tamper evident seal, in a double seal storage. Those are all security efforts that help preserve the security of elections. And so how can they convey that to their public so that the public knows and has transparency that they deserve into the process? And so I think communications and training on that is also a very, very important piece of this. We also require, as part of some of the grants we work with our local election officials, that they all have a contingency plan. We have templates available. We even do some trainings where we can walk through helping them put them together. And so having a contingency plan, I think, is something that, continues to be very, very important as we head into the fall, to make sure that we know what to do to be able to address the changing security landscape in elections. So what's next? So some of the things that we're working on now. We have a clerk advisory committee on, just about everything, where we work with our local election officials to help develop our initiatives. And cybersecurity is no different in that. So we have a clerk advisory committee on security. They've helped us come up with some great programs. So the trainings that we've done, we did a sub-grant program to local election officials, where if they did not have a compliant computer, if they did not have IT support, and or if they did not have the funding to be able to attend a cybersecurity training, we could give them a sub-grant to do that. Over 1,000 of our local election jurisdictions applied for those grants. So over 1,000 of them told us they did not have the computer they needed, they did not have IT support, and we were able to provide those things to them. And again, that was a result of this clerk advisory committee and figuring out, what do our local election officials need? How can we get everybody on sort of more or less an even playing field when it comes to cybersecurity? So they've been incredible and very instrumental in this process. We also have an Election Security Council. So this is a group we bring together from the federal, state, local level, so we can all meet and talk on a regular basis about cybersecurity in elections and make sure that, again, we're all in the loop and that we all know how to communicate in the event that there is some type of cyber emergency. Sub-grant programs. So I just talked about the one with the municipalities, and I'm going to talk real quickly about the one that we now have available to our county election officials as well. So we've received over the past few years some funding from Congress through the Help America Vote Act. So in 2018, we received funding, which we used to present a municipal level grant, those computers, IT support, and training we talked about, as well as a lot of those security efforts on the statewide voter registration database as well. Now in 2020, we received additional funds from the federal government. Now, of course, with any grant from the federal government, they have their own requirements for what has to be a part of it, what's restricted, documentation. And so whenever we do a subgrant, all those things have to be passed on as well. So we're just announcing actually today on June 25th at 2 o'clock, there's a webinar that will also be posted to elections.wi.gov where you can see more about a county election security subgrant. So there are a lot of federal grants out there right now. There really are. With the CARES Act and other things, we're finding there's a lot of federal grants that conflict with each other. This one is the only federal grant specific to elections cybersecurity. So the purpose and goal of this grant is to improve the election cybersecurity posture of elections, to make sure that as a state, we have a robust cybersecurity infrastructure to protect elections. And so our commission just approved a subgrant specific to counties for this purpose. So each county is eligible, as we'll be announcing today, for a $35,000 base grant plus 30 cents per voting age voter in your county. So 35,000 base, and then depending on the size of your jurisdiction and how many eligible voters you have, you'll be able to scale the amount that you're eligible to receive there as well. How does it work? Just real high level is each county would be required to submit a plan of how the funds will be used to improve your election cybersecurity posture. And we do need those plans, even if they're more high level, by July 15th. The commission will then take a look at those plans for approval to get those funds out to the counties as soon as possible. The plan does have to include either a election cybersecurity assessment or a proposal to use the funds to do an assessment in your county. So we need either the counties to do a self-assessment, if you have some great IT professionals to be able to sit down and say, what do we need to do to improve our election security posture? And then submit the findings of that assessment to us and let us know that you've done it. Or if you don't have that expertise, which some counties don't, to say that, we need funds to bring in somebody to help us do that assessment. We need someone with expertise to come in and help us do that assessment. And so once those plans have been submitted and the funds have been distributed, then after, in December of 2020, we will need a narrative from the counties again, explaining either how they spent the funds that they received or how they're earmarked to be spent to improve the cybersecurity posture of your county. So what can it be spent on? So again, this is to improve the infrastructure, the cybersecurity infrastructure that protects your county. So it might be things like email filtering, demarking, emails. It could be things like firewalls to make sure that your county infrastructure is secure, especially those places where your voting equipment or your election management system receives those unofficial results from the counties. Those might be places that you want to make more robust in terms of the firewalls that you have. Things like your website. Are you using a secure protocol? Is your website vulnerable to somebody coming in and defacing it? Because these are all security things to make sure that there's integrity in the information that you're providing, that somebody can't undermine or compromise that. Again, those assessments. We have a lot of companies that we've worked with to figure out what types of assessments are out there. So if a county needs help connecting with those resources, we have those lists. We also are going to have a list of what we recommend for different size jurisdictions. So if you're a small county with a limited amount of IT resources, we can recommend things that are appropriate for your type of infrastructure. If you're a medium jurisdiction, same thing. There might be some other things you might want to consider to improve your cybersecurity posture. And then for those large counties, there might be some tools that are much more appropriate for you because you're going to have the IT infrastructure to be able to maintain those into the future. And so monitoring and intrusion detection, you might have heard about Albert sensors. We have one at the state. Some of our larger counties have them as well. Again, this is something that's hooked into our federal resources. It's an information sharing, intrusion detection device. But again, these things can be expensive. And so some things like Albert might be more appropriate for a larger or mid-sized county that can maintain that into the future, whereas some small counties might not be able to budget for the maintenance of those efforts into the future or to have the IT experts expertise for that into the future. And so there may be other tools that accomplish similar things that we can recommend to you as well. So that's the county grant program. So I would just like to close out by thanking you all for the role that each of you play in securing elections. Even if you're not an IT expert, advocating within your community to make sure that your election official, that your county election official has what they need to be able to secure elections is a really important role you can play. And as we head into the fall, I would also say too, to all of us public servants at the state, county, or local level, we have all opportunities to become poll workers as well. So poll workers have to be residents of their counties, but I know your local election official would very, very much appreciate your service in that arena as we head into the fall. So thank you all so much, and you'll find our contact information for the Elections Commission, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you, Megan, on behalf of the Wisconsin Counties Association for taking the time today to present this information. It is vitally important as we move into this new arena of elections and technology and pandemics and all sorts of new fun things. So again, thank you on behalf of the Wisconsin Counties Association for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.